Good evening, and here are today's Tropics for September 26th, 2019. Uh, Please note, I'm not a meteorologist, and these videos are just a collection of my thoughts and opinions about the storms I'm talking about. And for any decision making, please consult the National Hurricane Center, your local officials, or your National Weather Service office. So today I'm looking at Tropical Storm Karen and Hurricane Lorenzo. So, looking at Karen first. See, the convection is really unhealthy. It's after bursting a lot and having really deep convection, it really collapsed earlier. Even then, the deep convection wasn't really all that well organized. It was pretty shapeless. It was just basically a blob, and now it's collapsing pretty much. And even with that, still hasn't managed to get organized. Per the reconnaissance earlier today, the center was over around here-ish, so it's still decoupled from that mid-level low to the north, or to the southwest of the actual low-level center. Now it looks like it might have become more elongated recently because it hasn't really had that convective kind of forcing to really tighten it up like there has been over that mid-level low, which hasn't worked its way down to the surface due to that low-level center kind of dominating things there. So it's really generally decoupled right now and is still failing to organize in pretty much the best conditions it's going to have. So it looks like this probably won't really strengthen much, if at all, just because it's just failing to organize even in these conditions, and it doesn't really have much time to further organize and then strengthen before it starts getting sheared and hit by a lot of dry air. So you can see that, there is a good outflow aloft finally, after being really shredded by a lot of northeasterly shear in the past week or so. It's finally got an anti-cyclone type feature aloft. So you can see there's some good outflow, especially the south and southwest. So you can see it pretty clearly here. It's doing pretty well with respect to shear. The shear is low, at least over the mid-level center here, but the low-level center, which is closer to this kind of new convection here, is getting sheared from the northwest just because of this anticyclone, which is focused over the deeper convection, or what was a deeper convection. So it does have that favorable shear right now, and it's also got a lot of other more favorable factors that are going to help it in the next day, or not even day, 12 to 24 hours. So we look at GFS, again, credit to Levi Cowan from Tropical Tidbits. We can see right now it's attempting to connect with that trough. It's also taking out, or trying to take out the remnants of Hurricane Jerry right here. So that's that low right here. It's just a remnant low. It is to the northeast of Bermuda here, so this might be that kind of feature right here that's burst, having a bit of convection, but it's really disorganized. It's not even a tropical cyclone right now. It's a remnant low, as there's no convection because it's just ruled by dry air over there, and it's not tropical really anymore. Anyway, Karen is trying to connect with that trough, and since it's now heading a bit northeast, just as this trough again attempts to take it out. But the problem is it's starting to slow down after really speeding to the north. So it's still heading to the northeast, but as the ridge starts to build to the northwest and west, that means there's a lot more northerly flow hitting Karen, which means it's kind of canceling out a lot of that northeasterly flow, which is pushing it out to sea. So it is slowing down as those steering currents kind of fight against each other. So that is also favorable for Karen right now because it will allow it kind of to rotate this convection or this wind around and allow for some low level convergence before instead of kind of just coming up near the storm, getting enhanced around the wet east side, and then southerly wind just kind of continuing on. Now it has a chance to wrap as it slows down. In addition, that shouldn't be there, but you can see again that it looks like that mid-level low is right here, and this is obviously the low-level center. So you can see they're both decoupled, and yeah, you're not going to get an organizing system with that just because you need to have coupled lows, or else they're going to compete with each other and just kind of really keep each other weak. Anyway, this really confirms the water vapor imagery. This is a 200 millibar wind, so this is like that upper wind. You can see they're pretty good at anticyclone, like up here. So yeah, it's allowing for that good kind of outflow. You do notice that it is kind of centered over the storm while it's also moving to the northeast. So that means that does explain why it does appear there's some mild northeasterly shear. There is good outflow in generally all quadrants, but it's also a bit more kind of limited to the north, but much less limited to the south. So that is a sign that there is still a bit of that northerly shear, but it's much less, and really isn't a problem at this point. If we look at the mid-level water vapor, you can see it's in the best environment it's probably going to get in the rest of its life, pretty much. It's also in a southwesterly or southerly kind of fetch of moist air from the Caribbean that is kind of coming into this area and allowing convection to fire without it being really impeded by a lot of this dry air. Like what's happening here, you can see this dry air is kind of wrapping around the storm, and it's got really no convection. It hasn't for a few days now, so that means it's kind of like insult to injury in a way. See this upper low in the Bahamas here. It's also modulating some of that flow as it does extend down to those mid levels, and you can see there's just very dry air that's coming down from the south on the other side of this low. So you can see what's kind of in store for Karen when the flow starts to like reverse. So we 18 hours. So this is about tomorrow morning, about 8 a.m. EDT. You can see still that mid-level low is still decoupled in this forecast. Like the GFS has done pretty well with it. With Karen, it really hasn't been excited about it, and it seems that it actually got it right this time because Karen has really failed to organize, and basically, I wouldn't be surprised to see it still decoupled because it just can't really get itself organized. It just seems a low level center is just too strong to really be pushed under this mid-level center, so they kind of stay independent, which hurts the general organization here. So you can see there's a bit of that westerly wind aloft. At this point, it's moved a bit northeast, so it's still in that phase where it is getting caught by the trough, but it's moving a lot slower as that building ridge that's almost overhead is trying to push it to the south, while you've also got that trough that's kind of moving out to the east. There's a bit of it here, I think, that, yeah, it's trying to move it out east, but it's not having much success doing that, so it's really slowing down. But that kind of does, in a way, help with a bit of that shear, since the shear is out of the west, but it's also moving to the northeast. It kind of cancels out a bit of that westerly vector, but there is a bit of that northerly, so it might, at this point, it might act as if there is northerly shear in here. Yeah, but still, the environment here isn't the worst. This is probably when the window closes for any intensification, it needs to really have a strong core to wrap that higher relative humidity around and keep convection going, and it has 18 hours to do that. And it's also about like 8 hours past this forecast, so it really only has 10 hours to somehow strengthen a lot, and then that would, or to allow it to wall off that dry air. So obviously it's not happening. And yeah, again, you can see this is when the window really closes, because at this point you've got the flow of moisture really being cut off. There's a bit of dry air comes in from the south. See right here, so you still have this moisture pocket, and the flow is kind of more favorable. It's still bringing in that moisture air, but you can see also the building ridge is bringing it in some of its own drier air that's coming in from the west-northwest. So this is starting to come in, and it's starting to impinge on the northern end of the circulation, so we might see at this point if there's any convection kind of struggling and releasing outflow boundaries, and then it's kind of the beginning of the end for Karen, basically. If you look further out, this is very early Saturday morning. There's some pretty obvious northerly wind aloft over it. Since the last frame, it's moved very slowly to the northeast. So, of course, it's just a model, so this can be a bit different. It's 36 hours out, though, so it's better at the shorter time scales, obviously. But at this point, the forces are pretty much equalized. That trough that's trying to pull it out is still trying to do that, but that building ridge is also putting some similar but opposite flow on it, which is kind of arresting a lot of the movement. It seems that stalls here. So if it's stalling and you have this very strong north flow, then it's going to get shear from the north. So it would be looking at northerly shear, which wouldn't help it in the first place. And at the same time, you have this moisture pocket still there, but you can see the flow is really kind of reversed, and it's now from the north, and it's really losing the battle at this point with the dry air. It kind of ends around here just south of Cairn, and you can see that there's a northerly flow, kind of like a changing of the guards to that drier air that is kind of getting into the circulation here. The relative humidity is at best like maybe 65 or 70%, but yeah, at this point it would be struggling a lot, especially with that shear that's kind of acting to bring, infect this dry air into the circulation, and shear wave convection that does try to form. You can see here at this point it's moved a bit to the west as that ridge kind of wins, and this trough moves out and doesn't really have much of an effect on Karen anymore, so it's mostly a ridge controlling things. You can see here that there's no mid-level low, or not really much of one of note anymore, so you see the system's really weakened. That might mean kind of in a way that the low-level center is dominant, but at this point it's not going to do anything because you have this flow aloft that is continuing to shear it. This might manifest itself in more northwesterly shear given the eastward or the westward movement, but are you going to get convection? Maybe, maybe not. But see here that like area of higher relative humidity is really leaving at this point. It's way south of Karen, and there's not much. There is a bit of moisture air around here. This might just be due to individual kind of thunderstorm activity, so it's not really much. And you can see, yeah, the ridge is still forcing a lot of that drier air into Karen. And since it's weak, and it's very likely to be weak, it's not going to be doing too much just because that convection won't be able to do anything. Looking at a much healthier cyclone, we have Hurricane Lorenzo out here. It's a 125 knot storm, so it's mid-grade category 4, and it's only at about 42 degrees west, so it's actually setting records. There hasn't been a storm this strong out this far east, really, in the reliable, reliable historical record. So this is like we're almost like watching history here, as the storm is just rapidly intensified in an unusual part of the basin. You don't tend to get a lot of that really rapid intensification until you get further west, where the sea surface temperatures are much higher than they are here, and the air isn't quite as dry. But Lorenzo managed to do it anyway. So just due to anomalously favorable conditions over the main development region. So you can see that I have heard some talk that's like maybe a category 5. It's probably not though, given that there is some disorganization, at least with respect to extremely organized systems like this. You can see on the north there's a bit of disruption to this convection, and it can't really keep that closed ring, or kind of thick closed ring of negative 70 degree Celsius convection. So at least right now it's not really a category 5, especially with the eye, which isn't quite circular. So this does kind of seem like nitpicking, but that's kind of what you need if you want, or not if you want, but if you're trying to see if the storm is a category 5, you do want to kind of be nitpicky, because category 5 is like the really creme de la creme of tropical cyclones. They have to be extremely organized, and you don't tend to have too many. But anyway, otherwise it's really generally healthy, and that's why it's managed to get up to 125 knots. Well, we'll see if these satellite estimates are correct. There's a research mission, like recon research missions, coming into it tomorrow, so we'll see how intense it really is, and that also give be a research kind of opportunity to see how one thing like the SFMR instrument works, because as there has been some talk that it does have trouble at very high intensities like this. So any research is good to try to understand where it can improve. If we look to the north here, there is a lot of upper divergence. As you can see, there's some convection kind of moving out this way, and then some more moving out that way. So you're getting that divergence aloft, which fuels that rising air, and this cooler cloud top area where you do have that rising air. This is part of that jet connection, which is really helping Lorenzo out right now. Look at the water vapor here. You can see just an absolutely phenomenal jet connection right here, especially for like this part of the world. It's pretty far south. I guess it is almost October now, but it is pretty far down, and it managed to connect with the trough out here. It looks like there's a weak upper low up here that might be fueling some of it, but you can see that there's a lot of that really good outflow here, and then there's a upper divergence in this area. And then look at this. You can see the dry air inside the core here. That's the eye. Well, the eye is basically subsidence in the middle of the storm, so subsidence at least in the middle of the storm. So when you have that air subside, the higher pressure really kind of compacts it, which means it has to warm and has to dry coming down, and that's what you see here, that warmer kind of area, as the air comes from the upper levels and subsides into the eye. So this jet connection here is also one reason why it's actually exceeding its maximum potential intensity here. It's quite high. It's around 120 knots, which you can see it's overshooting that a bit. Cyclones can do that if they're very rapidly intensifying as then they can the ocean kind of fluxes don't quite support it quite yet, or at that point, but the storm can it does take time to stop that really the trend of intensification, so you kind of do see it sometimes overshoot it, but then the fluxes can't really support it, so it's kind of forced to weaken because there isn't that convection really supporting the kind of bringing down of even stronger winds from the surface or from the mid levels, and the maximum potential intensity is, or you don't see it really hit much at this part of the world, just because there is that drier air and slash or shear, which basically keeps it from hitting that metric, which is usually reserved for perfect environments. But Lorenzo has an anomalously good environment over the main development region, with very high relative humidity, at least when it was really developing, and this great jet connection, which is kind of helping support this convection baroclinically rather than relying on the ocean, solely the ocean. Anyway, that's about it for tonight. If you have any feedback, I'd be happy to hear that, and yeah, have a good rest of your day, or have a good night. Actually, it's about midnight. But yeah, thank you for watching.